My friends, today we're checking out the incredible 40mm F2.5 from Sony. This tiny little minuscule thing right here is what we're going to be breaking apart here in detail. Here are some specs to get you going on this guy. Who's it for? Well, I'd say this is not for a beginner, but more of a hobbyist and leaning more toward the professional side of things, and definitely tailored more for a video lover or a filmmaker because of its incredible compact size. This thing is just incredible what they put into it. Look at the size of it. I can't get over it. So we're gonna break this thing down in detail today, and we're gonna dive right in, starting right now with the build and features of this guy. Okay, having a look at the build of this tiny lens reveals a lightweight aluminum body with plastic and metal internals. Now this lens is a great size and weight, obviously measuring 1.8 inches with the lens hood off and weighing only 6.2 ounces. This, along with a few others in the line, are among Sony's tiniest and most compact lenses, and they still managed to find room for a focus hold button, an automatic manual focus switch, and a click switch which allows you to choose between a hard stop and a nice smooth motion on your aperture dial. On the front of the lens you'll find a tiny piece of glass accompanied by 49mm filter threads, and on the back a standard metal mount with a little rubber gasket to aid in confidence when it comes to weather sealing. Overall, the build is typical of the Sony quality that we expect, only this time it's just a lot smaller. Just because of size, I was surprised they were able to include the little bells and whistles that they did, and overall for build, I give this lens 4 stars. And now let's dive into the performance of this lens, which is quite surprising. Being so small, you wouldn't think the autofocus here would be so good, but it is. It's incredibly quick, accurate, and basically silent. Again, this is definitely a video tailored lens, and the size and the speed of the autofocus are going to make it just a beauty to work with. In terms of manual focus, the focus ring is very small and you do have to be careful not to get your finger in the shot being right at the front of the lens, but the overall experience is fantastic, one of Sony's best, with its linear response letting you take full control. Now there's give and take with every lens, and you will notice some focus breathing with this lens as well as the other two in the line, and unfortunately it's not a lens that falls under Sony's breathing compensation features with their newer cameras. Here are some photo examples before we jump into a detailed look at the sharpness and optics, and the 40mm focal length for me is really nice. It's very close to what the eye sees naturally, so you can get some really pleasing photos I find. Now with 7 aperture blades, the bokeh is quite average, nothing out of this world, and it's worth noting that this lens does have a relatively close minimum focus distance of 0.92 feet in autofocus, and switch over to manual focus to get down to 0.82 feet. The lens keeps up well with tracking and of course eye autofocus. And now we'll have a detailed look at the sharpness and optics here, starting wide open at f2.5. The center of the image is, as expected, a decent sharpness, and it does hold together quite well until the very corners where it's just a tiny hint of softness, but overall a decent performance. You can notice a tiny bit of vignetting here, but it does pretty much disappear as we stop down to f3.5, and the sharpness does improve a little bit. Stopping down a little bit more here to f5.6 is looking good now. Not perfect here, we can see just a little bit of chromatic aberration here on the fine lines, as well as just a tiny hint of softness as well. And f8 here looking pretty good across the board now, a decent image overall. Stopping down further to f11, still good. And then between f11 and 16, you'll start to notice just a little bit of haziness, a little bit of degradation there, and then we'll continue down to our minimum aperture of f22 here. Now by no means is this a terrible performance, so overall even stopped all the way down, you can get some decent results. And what about the distortion and vignetting of this lens? Well, this is with the profile correction turned off, so as you can see, it's quite well controlled. Very little distortion and just a tiny bit of vignetting here. I'll throw that on here to show you the difference. It just brightens it up a little bit in the edges, or you can stop down to about f4. And again, the distortion is very well controlled. Overall, for the sharpness and optics of this lens, a decent performance with not much to complain about. And in terms of performance as a whole, I give this lens 4 stars. So finally, let's touch on the value of this lens, and for me this one's kind of a niche lens that's definitely not for everybody. Now at $600 US, this is not a cheap lens, and it's not an overly expensive lens either. Between 35 and 50 millimeters these days, there is a ton to choose from, but I'm confident when I say that this is probably the smallest available. With Sony, you do get what you pay for, and this might be on the higher side of what this thing would be worth to me, but for somebody that's dedicated to video and needs the smallest, most compact lens, this could definitely be one of the best choices. But for the average photographer and video shooter, I think there's some better options out there. For me, this lens gets 3.5 stars for value. So in conclusion, I think this lens is, for me, the best of the trio in this line, and I do enjoy the natural 40mm focal length. However, along with the other two, I think these are very niche lenses, and I think in a lot of cases there's better lens options for most people. If you're a subscriber, you know that I like to rate things on a scale from never think about again to consider to definitely buy. And in this case, really the only person I'm going to recommend this to is for somebody who's a die-hard video, intermediate, but not quite professional, that absolutely needs the lightest and the tiniest lens that they can possibly get. If that's you, I'd consider it. For everybody else, I'd keep the search going. If you found this video helpful, guys, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and join the community. If you want to pick this lens up or any of the gear that I use, check down in the description for affiliate links. And like always, make mistakes, be yourself, and get out there and take some more pictures. See you next time.